Let's say there was a man who routinely robbed his neighbor's house. He robbed his neighbor so often that it became a matter of routine, a tax, if you will. One day, the robber's mother had a tumor and was sent to the hospital and put on life support. The operation would cost $1,000. The robber then goes to his neighbor's house to get the money for the operation, but, to his dismay, his neighbor now has a shotgun and exclaims, "Get out or I'll blow you out." The robber then says, "You heartless bastard! Do you want my mother to die?" When a statist calls you a heartless bastard for resisting compelled payment for medical services of people you've never seen and never will see, he is making the same error in reasoning as the robber. He is equivocating your resistance to robbery with robbery. Another trick the equivocator uses is to talk about financial freedom. That is, having more money gives you the freedom to do more things. Now, this is true deductively, but is also palpably true to anyone who has ever been in relative poverty. Poverty limits your options. It limits your ability to do things even on a day-to-day basis. And so if the robber stole $5,000 from a man with $20,000, the robber would have more economic freedom. In fact, we may be able to say that net economic freedom has increased because the robber, going from $0 to $5,000, has gained many more options than the person who went from $20,000 to $15,000 has lost. Right? The upside for the robber is better than the downside for the victim. Or the equivocator may not call this financial freedom. He may just call it social utility. That is, net utility is raised by spreading the wealth around. I mean, as if wealth was just like some physical pie that could be spread around without, like it could be cut up like a pie, and the size of someone's piece would be determined by the percentage of it being cut up, which is not true, but anyway. Now, this is theft, plain and simple. But even if the equivocator admits this, he may then look at you as if he's some fucking hero and say, "Well, if that's theft, then call me a thief," with his primitive, pre-economic, egalitarian emotions running high. In which case, you will have to say why punishing the creation of wealth hurts the poor. 1. Incentives. By subsidizing poverty and punishing wealth creation, you get more poverty and less wealth creation. I mean, like, when you pay someone to do something, you will get more of it. This is not to mean that, like, somebody who is making $10,000 a year goes, "Oh, I could get welfare and I could be paid $5,000 a year to live on welfare. Well, I'm going to quit my steady job and go live on welfare." No, that's not what happens. What happens is that people who are, like, on the fence of working or not working will then choose to not work. It's those people, on the margins who are going to go into the not working pool. But then you have more people in the not working pool, right? Which means more welfare cases, which means you have to raise taxes. Raising taxes means more people on the margins are willing to go into welfare, so it's a cycle that sustains itself. And then you have to argue for the existence of free market welfare. In 2008, Americans gave $300 billion to charity, despite the state of the economy and the already existing tax burden and the already existing welfare net. In a true free market, you have, for poor people, 1, more jobs, right, because less restrictions and all that stuff, so you get more access to jobs. 2, more private charity. How much more is hard to say, but you will have a bit more private charity. And 3, cheaper goods, as deflation is a standard on a free market. And of course, more goods are being produced, and there's a similar number of wages going around, right? There's just more stuff to be had, which means more stuff for poor people to be had. And finally, poverty is subjective and will never be solved. The only way for a better life is to have a superabundance of stuff. Compelled charity can at best make life better for a minority in the short run. In the 1700s, everyone was living in poverty. But even back then, people were saying, take money from the rich people and give to the poor people. Now today, would we say take money from from people who are earning 5%, who are at the 5% mark in terms of the distribution of income in the U.S., and give that to the 1% mark? I mean, that's silly. But of course, that's what was being done in the 1700s when people were saying, have the rich people give to the poor people. It was the differential was similar to today of saying, take from the 5% mark, take from the top of the bottom 5% and give to the very bottom 1%, right? And of course, 100 years from now, people will be looking back at this time saying, well, everyone was poor back then. Like, what do they mean, start having welfare programs? They can start having welfare programs after they get their economy online, right? And so poverty is subjective in that way. The emotional and I think I'm edgy stance of the equivocator historically has not helped the poor. Integrating people into the structure of production, as occurs without any state interference and needs no planners, except for the emergent planner labeled capitalist, is the only proven way of raising the standard of living. Compelled welfare disintegrates people from the structure of production in a way charity tends not to. And this is an odd way to end this little section here. The reason charity does no harm to wealth creation is that it doesn't pervert the incentives. Right? A person can start a business and then keep what he earns and then goes, how do I want to spend this money? And may choose to spend it on charity. This will not disincentivize him from opening new lines of production in the way compelled welfare does. Now, he may open new lines of production and give as much to charity as he would in a statist society, but he doesn't know for certain if that's what he's going to decide to spend his money on in the future. If it is certain that his money will be spent for him by the state on welfare, right, and that his options for the money will be limited, then that's basically saying that's not going to be his money. You see how that works? Anyway. Also, private charity tends to focus more on rehabilitation simply because there is an incentive. A state program gets the money and then hands out the checks, and so aside from the detached prospect of electoral defeat, there is no incentive to rehabilitate people on welfare. Also, politicians who depend on welfare votes are incentivized to not rehabilitate. I mean, you may say I'm sick, but that's just where the incentives are. A private charity is competing with other charities, and so the donators will seek out the best charities to the extent they are actually interested in helping the poor. If the donator is merely interested in saying, look at what a good person I am, I donated to charity, he may spend less time researching the charity, though researching the charity and donating to a good one may actually become required if he wants to be seen as a good person.